Welcome to Podcast IRC, conversations with Indigenous scholars to advance understandings and gain new knowledge, hosted by the Indigenous Research Center at Salish Kootenai College.
Yeah. So that song was sung by Dale Olhorn to me this December, and it's a song that was composed for a man named Crazy Sister-in-Law, which he was born in 1827, or roughly thereabouts, and he died in the early 1900s, near the 1908, 1910, somewhere in there. So these songs are kind of used to honors people's accomplishments in battle. So in contemporary times, these songs are composed for individual accomplishments like graduations, PhDs, things like that. But this particular song is kind of commemorating an event where Crazy Sister-in-Law was wounded in battle. So the song says, "Crazy Sister-in-Law, you came close to them and you were wounded. Many times you were wounded." So during the original Crow War dance, these types of songs were danced to, but then once the grass dance ceremony came, these songs then replaced kind of the honor song idea. So, yeah.
Huh. Pretty cool. You know that one thing that happened around here was this idea that that songs didn't contain words. And I don't know where that came from in these parts, but it was always kind of my understanding growing up that Salish people didn't have words in their songs, just altogether, and it must have been a product just of certain songs dying out. But I think the more we gather information from the past that was not accessible, we find that this song is fairly common, I guess, among a lot of tribes. You know, you hear the reciting of a war deed in a song. And now you said this song has a particular power to it, or it originates from a certain source of power. Is that right?
Well, so they say these songs are a result of someone's spiritual power. So like when Crazy Sister-in-Law's medicine was the burrowing owl, so they'll attribute any success to his medicine. So they'll say he has songs that are composed about him. People say his name still because of his medicine, you know, and it's kind of giving credit to the spiritual power that one possesses, you know. So you could say that he has a song because of this reason. If that makes sense.
No, it does. Well, yeah,
it does make sense. I like how his vocals, the way it sounds, it's very like a deep a deep voice, you know, and you can hear the power in it when he sings it. That's what I was thinking about when I heard that. So
Yeah, Dale Oldhorn is kind of known for his voice, so he's made a living on his voice, really. You know, so the guy could narrate like books and documentaries and yeah. Dale
Turn
is
the
one
page.
we should hire him.
yeah, we should do a
Yeah.
podcast with him. Yeah. Yeah, those songs that what I really like about the song is old, but the tune is cool, man. Like anyone who sings or anyone who sat at the drum and or like appreciates Indian music, that tune is cool, man. The melody of the song is super cool. Now, it wasn't that uncommon during this time for people to share songs, meaning like so White Clay on the temple has the same song, but his words are different. His words talk about a different event, but so the straight part is the same, and we know that like several other people, like Old Coyote shares a song with somebody else, but the words are different. And I think once this song style came to the Crow from the grass dance ceremony, it was kind of like wasn't frowned upon to do that at that time, you know, because it's new, the song style's new, and yeah, but it's a cool tune, man. It's a super cool tune. So if anyone knows who Pretty Shield is, there's a book about Pretty Shield. This crazy sister-in-law is Pretty Shield's dad. So,
his dad
or her dad. All right, yeah. The dad of Pretty Shield is crazy sister-in-law.
Wait, now I got confused.
I know, I'm so confused.
Say it again.
Pretty Shield, who's a woman.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, yes, that helps.
Her father is crazy sister-in-law.
Why did they name a man crazy sister-in-law?
Yeah, that's did they? So Crows, like many other tribes, historically were named after the event or the accomplishment of somebody else. So
in this case, it's crazy sister-in-law.
So yeah, well, and even in teasing relatives will give names to each other. Like there's a famous Crow man named White Man Runs Him, which was a reference to an event where some white guys had chased somebody off. So they gave that name to that individual, meaning like this is an event that happened, right? So the belief is that you could give good fortune through names, and that because the name is true, meaning that happened, that good fortune will come to that individual. So like my son's name is Bishkiwalach Bachilish, which means like fortunate crazy dog, but it's the Crow word for the Marines is the crazy dogs. He was named by my cousin who was in the Marines for 9 years. So he named my son after something he did.
Oh, wow.
So crazy sister-in-law, because it's so far back, we don't know exactly the circumstance, but it's not that he encountered a crazy sister-in-law. It's that whoever named him did. And maybe it showed admiration because that term, balacha, like crazy, can mean like mad or like unstoppable, or, you know, so there's it's not as cut and dry, I guess, you know. There's also a Crow man named Crazy Ponderay, and that he was named after someone who fought against a Ponderay warrior who he admired. So, if that makes sense, I don't know.
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
So tying that into to Dale, how does this crazy sister-in-law tie into Dale Oldhorn?
He just knew the song.
Oh, he just knew the song.
Yeah, if you're around these individuals, there's people who just, that's kind of their thing. They can remember songs. And so anyone who's been around Crow country knew for years that there was a man named Clayton Mountain Pocket that knew these songs. And he knew songs. That's his thing. Victor Singer, Edmund Old Crow, Stephen House, all the way back to Warren Bear Cloud, Perry Pretty Paint. There's like kind of every tribe has these people they know that know songs, and Dale definitely has a vast knowledge in Crow songs. So I said, hey, do you know so and so song? And he said, yeah. And he sang it for me right there. Like, he didn't even have to think about it. He just sang it. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, that can persist for such a long time. Who knows
It's
who it
impressive.
jumped to? Yeah, it is. It is. There was a time, you know, or you know, if you're in tune with the singing, especially nowadays with the modern, you know, powwow singing, it's some people don't realize how the ability to sing and the ability to remember songs is quite the skill, you know, and people can sit around together for, you know, a minute or two and learn a brand new song they never heard before and just sing it out and then possibly even remember that song, you know, 50, 60 years later. So it's
oh yeah, and that
it's a
Mike
testament to
definitely
the
knows that.
yeah. Let's introduce Mike here. He's a guest today. Mike Lafromboise. He's a faculty member at Salish Kootenai College in the is it the governance program? Is that right?
Tribal governance, yes.
Tribal governance, yes. So
Cool.
Mike is pretty well known in these parts and in other parts across the country for his knowledge, vast knowledge, and singing skills and abilities. But yeah, we're lucky to have him here today. So yeah, what to remark
Welcome,
on
Mike.
that? Yeah, give us your remarks on that.
On the song itself, or the power of the song, or I need some
whatever,
context.
man.
All
Whatever.
of it.
Just singing in general, you know, kind of what I was leading to was, you know, singing and songs are really a vast source of knowledge that largely is not recognized, especially in academics, you know. So kind of in that arena is what we're kind of looking for. But anything that comes to mind.
You know, I could go a million different ways with this discussion.
Just pick one.
One that sticks out right now is when you're talking about songs of deeds or of a happening or an event. In Blackfoot or Piikani ideology, there was an event where these Piikani took this Sioux guy and they captured him and they jug him around the camp. And that Sioux, his name was White Dog. So the victory song we use in our Brave Dog Society, we still use that. And the words in there say that this is the day we made White Dog cry. And he was a formidable opponent, and he was well known amongst our people. And over there by, if you can imagine, the Sweetgrass Hills area, there was an encampment there. And my family, in our history, my grandfather was a part of that camp. And they got both sides of the story. And I happened to meet one of White Dog's great grandchildren. And he happened to have his own song about going out on his last time. So back about maybe 5, 8 years ago, maybe, those songs met. The song we used for him and the song they have for him. So that was an event for me, but uneventful for Western society because nobody really cares about that.
That's funny you bring that up because I was thinking to myself, like, for me, that'd be pretty cool, even though I'm not Piikani or I'm not Sioux. The idea of it is interesting to me and I would enjoy it. But I was thinking how many people were there and just didn't even care, you know? And it's like, it's always a bummer, man. You're always like, no one else is Jack.
Right. In addition to that, we killed that man and drug him around our camp. So to tell that story, to say, yeah, we killed your great grandfather, that's a whole nother thing in itself, to be like, damn, that doesn't happen nowadays. But those are the types of things that happened in our ways, in our way of life. It's a lot of our ceremonies are based on war, and the words in our ceremonial songs are based on war, because it's in times of uncertainty we use those types of things to help us. Kind of another sidebar, if you ever read of any Whistler's work, Clark Whistler and David Duval, and they did some volumes on the Blackfoot ceremonies that existed of that time. And on the last paragraph of the last volume, he says, we have all of these ceremonies, but we don't have the capacity to tell you about any of the songs. And as soon as I read that, I thought, I could tell you everything about these songs, what they belong to, what they're for, why they're used, when they're used, who can use them and who can't. Consequently, one of the people that wrote a lot of books about Blackfeet people did a talk. I can't remember. Her name was Alice Kehoe. I don't know if you know her work. She said she interviewed some of the elders at the time, and David Duval was a Blackfeet speaker. He was half Blackfeet and half something else, but he was his Whistler's interpreter. But they said that he hung himself during one of the medicine lodges in Browning. And a lot of those elders say it's because he didn't have the rights to have them songs and to sing them. That was what they believed.
Pretty powerful then. Nothing to play with.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, what you said about, the use of some of these things during times of uncertainty, especially during battles, when you're seeing loss of life, sometimes we talked about it in one of our episodes about just romanticism, and people who aren't attuned to, the events of the past. And, you can read about these battles and the number of deaths, but if you're not experiencing that death and that responsibility that comes with mourning, the responsibility that comes with making sure your loved ones are laid to rest appropriately, I mean, that's a pretty big deal, It's not just a fanciful story, that you read in a Western. These are real lives with real people dying. So you can just imagine the songs that would be needed in those times of uncertainty, when you're experiencing that. And I think the other thing you were mentioning about the songs, converging and having this conversation with a person whose ancestor or relative was killed by, your relatives, I think that's a testament to the relationships that tribes had at that time. I was just thinking about there was one of our last battles was, I think, in around 1883. Some Salish who were on a buffalo hunt over in around the Mussel Shell stole some horses from some Crows, and so the Crows, of course, followed the camp and recovered their horses and had a big old battle. And this is in 1883. Well, then here, fast forward a year later, you got these Salish visiting the Crows and acquiring the grass dance songs to bring back to their people. So no more than a year later, it was just a common occurrence, these battles, and then making peace. It was just part of the daily process of life, where holding grudges and those kind of things was handled in a different way.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to it was very common for tribes to talk about battles, sometimes even within a few days after it had happened.
Yeah.
Like a battle would happen and they might see another camp of the same people, and then they would talk about it. Well, you guys know this, but tribal people believe in verifying an event. That's like an important thing, the witness. So someone's not going to make a song about crazy sister-in-law if they can't verify that what they're going to sing about happened. Just like the White Dog song, if there's no witness to that, they're not going to speak about it. So sometimes the witness had to be even the other person, other tribe, or the enemy, what we call the enemy tribe. Even though I've researched that topic a lot, and I don't buy into this idea necessarily that there was hatred or and all this. It just seemed like they make it sound like we fought constantly.
Yeah.
Probably not till the horse and the gun, huh?
Well, it definitely sped up after the horse and gun, but it's just a different idea of battle is different. We're so used to this Gettysburg, like
combat stuff.
And it's like it's just not the same way, man. It's just not like Joe Medicine Crow talks a lot about going to Sioux country when he was a little boy, and those old time Crow Indians would be visiting with the old time warriors from Pine Ridge and Rosebud, and they were talking about fighting each other. And they were there to say, I seen you there and you did this, and they all laugh and whatever. And there's a famous story of Chief Crazyhead and Sitting Bull camping together when Crazyhead talks about seeing his father die. He says, I seen it. I was there when your dad was killed by us.
Oh, geez.
And they were camping together on the Little Bighorn River. So this notion is it's more about the deed as opposed to the battle. So like, I know many instances where two tribes would fight each other. They didn't consider it necessarily victory if the tribe came back and said, oh, we wiped them out or we beat them, we won. Who came home with deeds?
Yeah.
The group might have lost the battle, but did people come home with deeds? And that was celebrated, when
from a perspective on that, when you have our ceremonies, you have to have 4 coop stories before you can eat. And eating is one of the main things that happen in there. But the coup stories, when you translate coup story, it just means a gun. Namaka. It means a gun. But what it means is that you're touching the enemy without getting hurt. You're escaping some kind of danger. And that's pretty much, you want to have a lot of coup stories so that when you're in those ceremonies, you can recount those and it's kind of a venue to brag almost, but they're necessary. I'll just give you an example of the now time. The late George Kickenwoman, he would call upon different people. And back then, probably the late 80s, not many people would go to our ceremonies. So there was very limited people. And at that time, there wasn't really any war. There was no war happening. But in his conceptual worldview, he would say, you have to talk about war. You have to talk about escaping danger. But nobody really went to war. So we had to adjust. And education was one of them, and hunting stories were another of them, or sports, if you were involved in a victory. So a lot of those took the place of outright battle. So those are types of things that are the adjustment of what it means. The question I always ask my students: well, who are you, and how do you know? And these types of stories can attribute. And one of the questions that is on the list tonight is what is knowledge, and how do we get that knowledge? How is it acquired? The epistemology or the ontology of how we get that. Is it different? Is Blackfoot different from Crow, from Salish, from Kootenai, from Nez Perce? Each one of those has their own processes. And for Blackfoot people, we still have the process in place. It's still being used. It has never left. It's not lost. Our language is still very much alive. And you have to really be in tune with the language to understand a lot of these things. And we can go in any direction based on this conversation, and it always does. I mean, the conversation goes any which direction, but depending on who's in the discussion. But this is a good crew talking about these ideas, especially in the Western academic sense, because it's not really talked about. Like you said, Sean Deans, the song is not really talked about, or the importance of the song and why it's used and when it's used and who's using it.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
No, it does. And I think we kind of touched on that a little bit in some previous episodes, but we haven't I mean, there's always more to talk about it. There's a lot. We have barely touched it. And, this idea of knowledge, is a pretty important one, because that's what a research approach is trying to do. It's trying to create some new knowledge, and there has to be some pathway to verify whether the knowledge is true or not. So, really, if you think about knowledge, as kind of a manifestation of some high level of skill, or the manifestation of a person overcoming an obstacle to reach a certain what you might call success. If you think of it in that way, songs really are, especially these kind that we're listening to, are really a piece of data or a piece of validation of someone's knowledge that they had gained, whether it's a success in battle, or maybe it's as Aaron was saying in the beginning, a manifestation of some spiritual power that follows that song, that really becomes a really valid piece of knowledge in those times. Whether or not it's still valid today, whether it still can be used in academics in a different way, that's kind of the question. I think we have a good understanding of how to gain knowledge in a tribal way, especially in the ways you're talking about, the spiritual way. But then to shift that into academics, that's the tough one. That is the tough one.
And that's what I was going to ask is, so with these honor songs, and I'm just thinking of giving a shout out to all of our SKC grads that are finishing up this week, like as we're recording right now. And that's a manifestation of skill, right? And that is a huge accomplishment for them to finish with their associates and bachelors and different certifications. So yeah, like what's the SKC grad honor song equivalent that we can celebrate? Because that's a contemporary. You can
doing the defining,
argue it's a contemporary battle today that they're
that would be the question
accomplishing.
Who is doing the defining of that knowledge? And the SKC board of directors sign off on, and it goes down the line of the president, and then the dean of academic affairs, and then the department head, and then the instructors. The instructors are in the trenches giving this knowledge out, but it's the board of directors who sign off on validating that knowledge. And when that student goes out and says, hey, I'm going to get this job, I have this degree from Salish Kootenai College, how valid is that in the Western society sense, as opposed to a degree from Harvard or a degree from Stanford? And then, again, the defining, who's doing the defining of native knowledge? And like I said, it's the process of how you would attain that epistemology of going out, seeking knowledge through a vision quest, through transfer of songs, through transfer of power from one entity to another. Like I said, we still have that in place for Blackfoot people, and I know Crow people have that, and I know Kootenai people have that, but not a lot of tribes have that nowadays, which brings me to that question again. Well, if we're going to say we're this Indian or that Indian, or we're Indian or Native or Indigenous, how do we know this? How do we know? What's the validation on that part as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And that question for some weird reason in Indian country today is seen as an attack. And I don't know why Native people, like why, I mean, I guess I know why kind of historically, but we're in a weird time, like a pretty delicate time when it comes to ceremony, song, social structure, kinship. It all plays into a part of an identity, but it seems to me that if you were to approach the average Native person and say, who are you and how do you know? Mm-hmm. The instinct right away is to kind of be on the defense. Now, when you approach culturally competent individuals, that question doesn't come to them as offensive. Now, I don't know if I'm wrong for thinking that, or if I'm kind of out in left field with the way I'm thinking. It's just in my experience when you talk about things like that, and when you try to address that idea, it goes immediately to enrollment, right? Or immediately to like, well, I grew up on the res, and yeah. So at what point? I have a question for you then, Mike, or for anybody else if people want to jump in on this. My question is then, when is that line blurred, or when is it abrupt? The difference between like reservation mentality and being tribal. Because if you approach someone and say, who are you and how do you know? There's a large majority of like Native people who immediately tell you, well, I grew up here. Well, is that I know it's part of it, but what's the difference, you know?
Well, there should be a collective agreement of what that means. And because we've been removed from that collective agreement via vis-a-vis, is that your famous word? Vis-a-vis.
Yeah. Vis-a-vis.
Edit.
The glove don't fit.
Right. You know, and then here we are now as a product of all of these things, but we're making a resurgence. And it's very evident when you have an Indigenous research center talking about these issues again. So the collective agreement is not lost. It's out there in the ether. How you attain that via tribal college, Crow, Little Bighorn, Blackfeet, Salish Kootenai College, you know, that's where you would begin your quest for that. But when you start to get into who am I type thing, it's there. I mean, there's elders that still exist that speak the language and have knowledge of those ceremonies for times of uncertainty. I remember I was listening to your podcast when it was talking about a song, could it still be relevant today? And I was thinking, yeah, it can be. I mean, it still could be used if you were to get it transferred to you, and you would, the intent of how you would use that song to. It's just like hand game songs or love songs. They're meant to mesmerize the opponent or your the person you're trying to seek out. Still has power.
Yeah. I was gonna say. So it seems like the job of Native people today is to create the environment where these songs can thrive, or where this type of thing can thrive. Not necessarily wait to say, well, when this song is relevant again, I got it and I'm going to bust it out. It seems like part of our job is to create it, to create the environment for it. We can't just rely. So that brings us back to tribal college. Does the tribal college play a role in creating that environment? Now, I'm not speaking specifically for our college or any individual college, but
I should.
And I would agree. Yeah. I would agree.
I agree too. I think the pathway to doing that, though, is what's, I think, perplexing. You know, I don't necessarily know if, you know, folks feel qualified to do that. They don't have enough background knowledge to promote it. Maybe they don't know the right people to even talk to approach these conversations. That seems like to be.
what I've run into this so much where people say, I don't feel like I'm qualified. Right. I've run into this a lot. I know you've run into this. So for years I have been doing like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and one time I was going to get my purple belt, right? And I said, oh man, I feel like I'm not a purple belt yet, you know? And then my instructor said, if it was up to the student to decide if he was ready, he would either be a black belt on day one or he'll never achieve black belt. So it's not the job of the individual to say, am I qualified or unqualified? I feel like it's the group. That's what makes us tribal. We're a group. We do it as a group. And if the group sees you as qualified, then you got to step up. Otherwise, you know.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there, man. I think it's just it's the matter of it has to be within certain people's purview of things that they deem important, and through the history of, you know, the history of Indian people getting, you know, culture and things stamped out of us. You know, some people aren't privileged to have that as their driving force, or they don't understand, you know, what is the thing that's going to motivate the right people to do the right thing at the right time. So you default to what you know, and if all you know is something that's largely been non-native or you know, partially, then that seems to be one of the challenges with leadership anywhere for that matter, you know.
Yeah.
How do tribal governments promote culture? Is it even their job? That's the thing. Is it a tribal government's job to promote cultural pursuits?
I think it has to be now, because.
How about this concept? When you write a proposal and you write it in a Western society sense, and then an afterthought, hey, let's put culture in it, a culture component.
Yeah.
Right there, you've already failed the culture.
Yeah.
You know how many times we've had this conversation, especially me and Shandin, where you're like, well, you guys have to define. How are we going to put a cultural component into this? It's like, all right, we're already lost.
Whereas, you base your framework around what you're doing, and it's really difficult here on this res because there's 2-3 different tribal entities that think differently, but a certain amount of money coming in. Same with Fort Belknap and Fort Peck. They have 2 different tribes in their realm, and it's difficult to come to an agreement. Whereas, you know, the other reservations, they still can't get along. But I mean, there's so many things that on the collective that's still there, but they overlook it because they've been so westernized in their educational thinking. And that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's just where we're at now. I feel very fortunate as a researcher and a scholar and that I grew up with Blackfoot language in my home, and I listened. I should have listened more. I should have listened more, but I was told that if the language is what makes you who you are. So I took it upon myself to really learn and research more and to listen. And I just made a commitment to myself a long time ago. I'm just going to speak it, and they're either going to correct me or they're going to answer me back. And when I do lectures, I throw language in there, and if they're shaking their head, I know that's my validation of saying, all right, well, he knows what he's saying. I get it, you know?
Yeah.
So when elders sit there and listen to you and they've sit through your whole thing, you know you're on the right track in that aspect. I mean, that's just one validation point for knowledge. But even our chief, who is our hereditary chief, he'll tell you, I don't know everything. And if you feel that you can have a different story, I'll come up here and correct me, please. He said, I wish those older people were here to hear my story so they could validate what I'm saying. But going to that venue part of of validation. The smudge is a very important part, for lack of a better word, smudge is a very important part of that truth and the educational process, because that's your binding contract between you and creator when you light the smudge. So you got to be careful with the words that you say, because you could hurt somebody or you can help somebody. Your words, and this is where we started to get into quantum entanglement and quantum physics. But that's a whole nother lecture. But it's shown in our language that we could talk about those things in great detail, and it's part of the framework of what it means to be Blackfoot or Piikani or Kootenai or Salish or Crow. It's there. You have to bring it out somewhere. And again, the tribal college should be that venue to do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think so. You know, I'm an advocate for it. But it's that fine line between, you know, what authority does that institution have over rites and rituals that are held by the community? Mm-hmm. Not that they would have the, you know, possession over it, but just like Western academics is this kind of goofy, you know, if you write something while you're employed as a university a professor, then all those things that you produce there are property of the university. And that's really
that's an odd thing. It's the museum mentality.
Yeah, it is. So, you know, and you see it surfaces in the tribal college system as well. You know, you got policies, and it's the same darn thing. So that's kind of the cautionary step, I guess, that, you know, community members have, at least around here. And they have it also, they also hold that true with the tribal government, because they say that's just a pseudo government. It doesn't represent a true tribal way of getting things done. It's just well, you guys all are familiar with the IRA and all those kind of things. So
I just be saying, yeah, just sign my travel, please. I got
to. Just sign my travel paperwork.
I need my per diem by Friday.
That's all we need. Just give us
Can I get my per diem in cash?
Yeah. And my 3 kids that are going.
Oh my God, stop right now.
Can I get a double bed? Okay. Can I get 2 queens? Can I get 2 queens?
Yeah, I need at least 4 rooms for me. Well, let's. What's up?
Nothing.
What you got?
Nothing, man. Nothing.
Let's listen to the sex. The sex. Oh God. Let's listen to this. Second. Let's listen
that one out.
Let's listen to this next song, and we'll continue this conversation. Good.
We'll be right back with Johnson v. McIntosh.
Here it goes, coming in.
Man, they were jamming. Oh, woo.
Oh.
Whole lot.
So I realized just now, Shandine, that I sent you the wrong recording. It's the right song. It's a different recording though. So I lucked out there. That song in Crow Country is called "Searching for the Child," and it's a song that is used when you're gonna adopt somebody or induct somebody into the grass dance society, or what we call the hot dance, or the daytime dance ceremony. But that song is used today by many Crows for different things. Like if someone's going to be adopted by a family, if someone's going to be inducted into a certain society, or if they want to grab somebody out of the crowd for any specific reason, like to help out with a certain ceremony, they'll say, sing "Searching for the Child," and they'll go and look for that individual and grab them. And the reason I picked that song is because it's not unique to the Crows. This song is part of a ceremony called the grass dance ceremony, or the Omaha dance, which comes from the Omahas and kind of was spread through Indian country by the Santee Sioux. And it goes as far west as right here in the Jocko Valley to central Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, I think even Ontario, but all the way to Wisconsin, all the way down to Oklahoma. This ceremony is done by many different tribes, but one of the signifiers of this dance is this song. And so, and because we have a special Piikani guest today, this song's used a lot up there in Blackfoot country. So I thought it was relevant. I thought it was a good song to pick for this. And it seems like songs is of interest to a lot of people. I've been getting good feedback on the podcast about people loving the songs. The reason I picked this song is because it's kind of a unifier. I think sometimes we like to consider ourselves super different from everybody else, but this song is this ceremony and this song specifically, because this song seems to stay with the dance. Some of the dances have changed the songs a little bit, or the protocols have changed over time, but this particular song seems to stay alive with all of these tribes. So, yeah.
It's pretty fast paced and energetic for a ceremony song. It's like pretty fast. I don't know. Huh.
Yeah, that like you're saying, the ideas of the ceremonialism, it has many forms. We like to think of, at least nowadays, in the 80s and 90s, when you think of the honor song, it's this slow trudging song, chug around the stadium or the arena, to honor somebody. But that's pretty new kind of a concept, and those type of songs that we think of are like that, maybe have a place in a different venue. But yeah, this song is pretty familiar around here. If anybody heard it, they'd say, "Oh, that's a coffee dance song." That's what some people would say, and it was used through when they were ending the war dance, or when they were going to take a break to have a meal. And that song, that was one of 3 songs that could be sung for that kind of break time. And the name that they gave for that particular song was called the Sinchuchauman. It just means the praying song. So that was what they were doing. They were praying for the food. And typically it would be they'd put a pot in the middle with the buffalo broth in it, and the dancers would dance around, and they'd stick their stick in that pot, signifying the end of that song and the blessing for that food, or the prayer for that food. And that was how that song it was used around here. And that was, like I said, one of a few of those type of songs that were sung.
Oh, dude, I'm jacked, man.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And even it was documented, who and where this song came from. It's documented pretty well that we learned it from the Crows. In fact, there's a couple gentlemen that are attributed to going over there and listening and learning and then bringing that back here. And that's knowledge that not a lot of people know. But yeah, and that whole grass dance type of ceremonialism came along with that. But it didn't really take hold, to a real strong degree. It was more kind of for entertainment, I guess, just because of the time period. It was, I don't know when that was, around about 1887, I guess, when it made its way here. And then, you get the reservation era coming in right after that, and, some hard times. So it never really served the purpose that it may have served for the folks further east.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because when I used to sing with different Blackfoot drums, and we got to be a part of like certain transfers, and they'd say, let's sing the capturing song, and they start singing this song, it used to blow my mind, So maybe Mike, you could talk about that and how that kind of works, and just whatever, man.
Yeah, so that particular song, I remember hearing it when they would want to find new society members for. Probably the only society that I remember using it was the Rough Rider Society out in the Star School area, and it was just a social society, but the members of it were part of the Grass Dance Society that had the Crow Belt, they call it, and the Piikani got it from the Crow, but the Bloods got it from the Sioux directly. So there's two stories about how those, like the War Bonnet came, and then the Grass Dance Society, which we call Gaitspy. It just means people with parted hair. That's what we're referred to as Sioux people. But when it came, it wasn't really, it was ceremonial in nature, but it wasn't a Blackfoot thing. So it was kind of an afterthought type thing of, after we're done with our stuff, we'll do this stuff. And for lack of a better word, the Sundance, our medicine lodge, after all the societies and all the validation of our stories were reenacted, then the center pole go up, and then those other things would happen, like the grass dance, and that's kind of, people would dance that way. And a lot of the chicken dance society, prairie chicken dance society, emulated some of that style. So um, a lot of the songs come from back east for those, and it's just been carried out, and people think, well, that's a Blackfeet thing, or that must be a Crow thing, but it's not. It comes from another place. But what I would like to do, maybe with this group or this crew, is travel down east to where Omaha is and ask what they think of this. Because I've heard stories in the powwow venue of how the Omaha dance came about, the halushka, and the words in their songs that they still use today talk about war. And it wasn't really a ceremonial thing, like you said, Shandine. Was kind of more like a showcase for coup stories.
Yeah.
Scalping songs.
And that's how it's used in Crow. It's kind of a blend. I think there's some people consider it what a semi ceremony, or like it's quasi. It's kind of a blend of something social, but something like spiritual. But anytime a war deed is told, they said those that are there will get the benefits of successful deeds, So if you listen to someone tell a war deed, and consequently they're making a wish for you, if you're there, and it's just kind of like the spillover effect,
Yeah, same with Blackfoot. After the story is told, they'll say, and that luck that I had getting that, I give to everybody. And everybody will accept that for themselves as being good luck and good fortune of that event.
I'd be interested to know, Shandine, if those two other songs that are used for the coffee dance, what those songs are, and if they are actually used like for the Crows, when we do the coffee dance, we put the same exact thing, put the pot in the middle with the broth, but we call it the blessing of the meat. And we know of 2 songs. We use 2 different songs for that. And so, Mike, do you know if the kettle dance that is done up there, that I wonder if that song is consistent with the 3 other groups?
I would like to see, because the Blackfeet don't do it down here, but the Blackfoot up north do still.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're all intertwined, some of it, like for down here, we use blacktail, but they don't use it up there. But up there, they it's called they use dog meat, puppies.
Oh,
Yeah, the eating of the dog head stew.
Yeah.
So maybe for our listeners, if they don't quite understand what we're talking about, so
we might just
man, that's probably the most specific podcast discussion ever. So what we're talking about is really the predecessor of modern powwow. So modern powwow was kind of born out of this idea of the grass dance ceremony and the rodeo. So categories, sessions, the grand entry, all of these things came from the rodeo. But song structure, song style, the big drum, the respect for the dance arena, all of that came from the grass dance ceremony. Now, it's important for people to know that when we say the grass dance ceremony, we're not talking about grass dance like at a powwow. It's 2 different things. The grass dance at a powwow, from what I understand, is very, very new. It was kind of really made popular by a man named Charlie Parshall from North Dakota. But other than that, I don't know much about it. So, and before the grass dance ceremony is started, before it's done, the owner of the drum has to come. So you hold offices within this ceremony. The owner of the drum has to come and hit the drum 4 times. Once that happens, then the dance can start. So the ceremony itself, you don't wear the bustle, the crow belt, until that happens. They'll sing a song for that, for the putting on those. They call it the retrieving of the tail feathers. There's other names for them too with different tribes, but it's the start of it. So beforehand, they'll say, sing some songs, but don't hit the drum. So the dancers can dance socially, so they'll tap the side of the drum, but they can't hit the middle. And they're not wearing bustles because they have not sang the blessing of the tail feathers yet, or the retrieving of the tail feathers. So I think that's kind of this idea of where like the grass dancers at a powwow and then what's happening in the ceremony kind of fused together, because if you notice at certain powwows, or especially in the 90s and early 2000s, it was real popular to sing the grass dance category song by tapping the first 2 starts on the side of the drum.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that when that was cool?
Isn't it still? No.
Oh. Mike's like, that's not cool no more. Sean Dean still wants to compose a drum song.
Oh, yeah, I do. I am. I'm
Never
doing
mind.
now.
That's real specific. But just to give an idea, it's also called the war dance by some tribes because you recite and recount war deeds and war accomplishments throughout the dance. And it's considered an honor if you're picked to eat from the stew pot. And that's where this forked stick comes from. So they would take the forked stick, put it in the stew pot, and then feed the 4 veterans with it. So if you were picked, it was a big deal. Like it was kind of like, man, I got picked. So they would, and then they would feed everybody after the dance was over. So they would, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just so people listening, they'd be like, what are these guys talking about? It's really this ceremony that acted as a unifier for a lot of tribes, because I've heard stories of men from Rocky Boy in the early 1900s going to Fort Berthold, going to even Blackfoot country, going to Crow, and participating in the telling of war deeds at this dance. The songs were interchangeable, the protocols and the etiquette was interchangeable. So it fascinates me. The ceremony has always fascinated me because we're always told those are your enemies. Those are your enemies. Nobody likes you because you're this. But yet we have this ceremony, which is revered by many tribes and respected by many tribes, but it was shared and literally handed to people saying, here, I don't think you would give spiritual power to somebody you don't like, you know? I think we need to hear from the ladies. Camia, this is your time to shine.
Oh man, after all that. No, I just kind of got stuck listening to the conversation because I think that like each of you have really specific knowledge about the songs that we're talking about, and like what you're listening to is like something that I don't have. And so it gives me a lot to think about when it comes, I mean, what you're saying gives me a lot to think about, just the information about the songs, but then kind of this, it gives me a lot to think about in terms of these bigger questions that, you know, we've framed about knowledge and how it's acquired and who gets it. So, I mean, it's just really interesting to me to hear what you guys know about this, and then it's helping me to get a better sense of this idea about like how do you know something? I mean, everything that we're talking about is that I mean, it seems to me what I could say is what I'm perhaps starting to understand is just because you had an experience, because something happened, that isn't necessarily knowledge. Like that doesn't count. Sure, it happened. All right. But unless somebody else is, like you're saying, going to verify that, to say, yeah, that happened. And I think maybe we share an understanding about what that means. We've got a common perspective that like there's some consensus about not just what happened, but, you know, how to think about that, what to do about that. And so, I mean, that is a big deal, right? And I don't think that that's something that we, like you're saying, SKC, Western academics, we don't talk about that kind of stuff. It's just, what's knowledge? Well, it's what I tell you in class. And I'm thinking about this as like, oh,
that's the pedagogy
man.
of the oppressed. If you ever read that book by
What's that?
Paulo Freire, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
It's the oppressed knows everything. You, the student, know nothing. You be quiet and I'll tell you what you need to know. Whereas the inquiry of and this is what Maslow brought out in his study, is how he got that model was how he viewed how the Blackfoots taught their children. They had a lot of reverence for their children. They didn't tell them to be quiet or to be seen and not heard, or vice versa. So the difference was the pedagogy of how they taught. And again, when you're trying to conquer people, you're going to feed them what they need to know and what they don't need to know. So that's the dichotomy that we live in of these two conceptual worldviews. They don't match, and that the side of the ideology of what it means to be whatever tribe you say you are, it's being pushed back. It's being regulated to after 5 on Wednesdays, or on Saturday, doing anything will have our doings. They're still practicing those ways that been here for thousands and thousands of years. They're still singing the songs that have been here for thousands of years. They're just doing it in the time frame that doesn't fit. And I always talk about Indian time in my classroom settings, and a lot of people think Indian time is whenever we begin. Well, when everybody gets there, we'll begin. That everybody's lazy and we'll get there, but it's very precise because when you have like Sabbath berries are only available at a certain time of the year for a couple of weeks at a time, and if you don't have those berries, your ceremony is shot for the year. Plus, your food source is shot for the year. So you have a limited amount of time to gather those. As over here too, I think the bitterroot is only available for a few weeks out of the year.
Mhm.
It doesn't grow on our side of the mountains, but we use it in our ceremonies. So there's a tie with a lot of tribal people that we just don't talk about. And the validation of what that means is it could help that individual student say, you know what, I don't know much, but I want to learn more. Where could I go for that? Oh, well, come down to your local tribal college and we have courses for this, or we have uh, a venue you can learn from. And I think that's the beauty of tribal colleges that allow that to happen. Whereas in the University of Montana or Bozeman, the other one, they don't have that so much. Maybe just a club room or a powwow, which is good. But there's so much more to knowledge, indigenous knowledge, that this venue needs to put out there more so that people could say, hey, they're talking about this again. Let's go find out more about it. It kind of plants that seed. That's what I hope this does.
Yeah.
Man, I'm just blown away. I love that Mike's on the show. I just love it. It's a really good stuff. And I guess listening to everybody discuss things, one thing that I really have taken from this conversation, and I think more people need to embrace it, is that we're all tribes and we're all tied together more than I think people like to admit. I think they have this concept of we're enemies and this is your territory over here and this is yours over here. But as hearing you guys talk about like song and dance and bitterroot and things like that, it's like we're so much more tied together. I mean, we're all very separate and have our own customs, but I just really feel like we're tied together more, and I wish more people would start to embrace that a little bit more. So you guys gave me a lot of food for thought for sure. So
Cool.
yeah, cool. Mike, yes.
Yeah, I was pretty excited when the topic and knowing Mike was going to be on, because we've had a lot of cool conversations. So I was hoping it would be replicated on the podcast, and so far so good. So Sarah, what do you have to add?
Thanks, Aaron.
You're on.
Well,
you're in the batter's box. You can't get out of this one.
Yeah, thanks. Well, okay, so I've been a little quiet, but I've been quiet on purpose. Some of you probably know where Sparrow Lane is, just north of SKC. My house is just north of that, and there's a little dirt bike track over there. And so there's been a lot of people out enjoying the weather, and it's been a little loud.
Is that what? Because I've heard some
sorry,
of it.
there might be a motorcycle in the background, so I'm trying to mute myself. But yeah, for this conversation, I think the one thing I started thinking about was in terms of knowledge, and we were talking about acquiring knowledge. I also am trying to think of like there's a purpose to having knowledge, and and that might mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and depending on what knowledge it is that you're gaining. But I guess I tend to think that there's a deeper meaning for some of this knowledge that we're talking about acquiring, and I'm also really sensitive to the fact of misusing knowledge at any point in time. And so I'm just, like those are just the two points I'm kind of thinking about, and how center can, we talked about it before too, about intent. Like, what's your intent with the knowledge that we're acquiring? Maybe that relates to this point on the purpose and what we can use our knowledge for today in these very different times.
I think we just iceberg straight ahead.
Yes.
But before we go, I failed to mention that Mike was awarded our faculty research grant.
Hey.
Woo woo.
So, Mike, maybe just quick for people listening, just what are you going to research and what do you hope to get out of it?
So, a lifelong, I've been involved in my ceremonial ways. And again, they're not academic, but because I live it, I thought it would be a really good idea for myself to research out songs. But I mean, so I narrowed it down to the blacktail because it comes from this land over here. It's validated over here. And the Piikani people must, in our timeline somewhere, they were gifted this ceremony, but they felt it was powerful enough to keep and still continue to this day. So even though Blackfoot people had their own ceremonies that were given by Creator, they adhered to this one and kept it. They kept it alive. So I really want to look to see what Kootenai people think about it, Salish people think about it, and my own Blackfeet people think about it. And I use Blackfeet and Piikani interchangeably, but again, who's doing the defining is how I would use that type of thing. So I'm really excited for this. It's something I can't do lightly because of the power of songs and having the rights to have them and even talk about this is very crucial. So that needs to be discussed in detail so that nobody gets hurt, especially my family and the people that are close to me, especially myself or anybody else. That's a huge component that must be talked about in any setting when it's ceremonial, anything with Blackfoot people. But I would imagine it goes the same with Kootenai and Salish and Crow. But again, that's what I'm looking at doing, and I wanted to, shed some light on songs because songs are the physical documentation of permission. They're that valid. So, like, I think one of the ladies was talking about having the song sung at graduation. That's the perfect venue for as opposed to getting a piece of paper. If someone were to sing your song, that's equal, if not better. I mean, we can go for hours. I could talk for hours on this, but people are hungry and people need to.
People's blood sugar's low.
We haven't heard Aaron eating yet.
I purposely ate before the podcast because I didn't want anyone to give me hell about eating. But
in my house, though, everybody's all standing around with their empty plate, looking at me like, "What's gonna happen?"
So, but I'm excited for your research, partly because I don't know.
We all are. Yeah.
I don't know if this has happened before. I really don't know if a native institution has done research at this level by Indian people for Indian people. It's like, and if I'm wrong, that's cool too, because that just means people are doing good stuff, But I'd like to think that this podcast, especially today's episode, this discussion, I challenge anyone to find where this is happening again. So this is not like something people just talk about. In fact, we're always told like, don't talk, but I don't believe in secret. Like, we don't live in secret, right? Just like there was a time where the Kootenai people, the Salish people saw enough value in giving ceremony away to the Blackfeet people. That tells me that there is no secret, like there's no secret don't live in this hidden. We for sure live in a world where we understand respect for something and the reverence for something, and the care for something. But part of that care is also to be the custodian of it, and in use discussion is all part of that custodianship. Is that a word?
Yeah,
We're making it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
hoard it.
It's almost like husbandry, right? You know how people use the word husbandry? You know, like animal husbandry. Is there such thing as ceremonial husbandry?
Oh my God.
There is
There is
now.
now. It is now. Hey, Mike, use that in your paper, in your research, and you as the expert. Now that's you set precedent for that term.
You're
so.
talking in metaphor.
Oh, I'm talking in circles here, holistic circles.
Oh,
I'm
no.
talking in holistic circles. As I was
You're
saying
way
that,
too Indian.
as I was
Quit
saying
it.
that, I was holding a dream catcher in one hand, a medicine wheel in the other hand, and
And a Fanta.
I had my acapella peyote music playing with a flute in the distance, just faint enough.
Well, with that said, if in 100 years all of us on this podcast are going to be an ancestor, what are they going to say about us? Did they perpetuate this way of life, or did they just talk about it, type thing? I always throw that to students, to get them to think.
To get them to act. Yeah, for sure. That's, you just like, oh, this guy's serious.
Yeah, acting. Take it seriously.
Oh,
Oh, God.
oh,
Oh.
oh,
Okay, it's been an hour and 20 minutes.
yeah. Hey, I
Thanks
think
for
we need to
that.
have a part 2 to this discussion and just start from where we left off, because we're starting to get into some pretty cool stuff that even me, like, I got hyper kind of about it. Like,
Yeah.
man, well,
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody else had that, but while like Mike and Shandi were kind of talking, I like sat back and I was kind of giddy. Like, this was cool.
Yeah.
We also briefly talked about identity too. Might be another good topic.
Identity.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, identity.
Oh yeah,
Talked about that
identity.
briefly.
Yeah, and it got kind of woven into some of the discussion, but maybe that's something we can revisit. I think. What do you think, Shondine? Is there a part 2 to this bad boy?
Yeah. I think there'd have to be. We
Yes.
covered.
Yes.
Yeah, we covered a lot of material, and we're just beginning to start. We're just starting to talk about some of these important details, and it would be good to get more in depth and dive deeper into what these songs really signify as far as knowledge is concerned.
Man, I'm all over it.
Yeah. So I think for sure probably have a part 2 next week, and continue with the
Ceremonial
discussion.
husbandry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, tell the advisory board to listen to this too, because this was, if they want to be, what are you guys doing? This podcast, this had me going today.
Yeah. Thanks to Mike too for all his contributions. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank
All right. Thank you, everyone. And congrats, SKC grads. Woo woo.
Thank you for joining us on this episode. And to learn more, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at IRCSKC. You can find us also on Facebook and YouTube by searching SKC Indigenous Research Center. You can also visit our website at irc.skc.edu. Don't forget to join us next time as we continue our discussions on Indigenous research, Indigenous research methodologies, and Indigenous worldviews.